But otherwise a dry night and a clear night largely, but certainly across the Midlands, parts of Wales, southern England, some mist and fog patches are likely to form. Further north, it's likely to stay clear, and we are going to see a frost. A cold start wherever you are then to Friday, and there will be some perhaps quite dense patches of fog through the morning rush hour. Could take a couple of hours before that clears away completely, but it should eventually go. Certainly by late morning it's looking largely dry and sunny. Sunshine fairly hazy at times over northern Scotland, but for most places it's a cracking day if you like spring sunshine. Temperatures getting widely into the teens, 16, 17 Celsius is possible. Cooler with a brisk breeze across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. That brisk breeze lingers through Friday evening and into the weekend as well. We'll also see the wind picking up along the south coast of England. So that'll be a feature of the weather through Saturday, but look at that. Sunny skies almost across the board. By Sunday, just the threat of a few showers coming up across the south.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Thanks.
And we'll be discussing Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe's release with my political panel and much more too, and you won't want to miss my Real Me interview today. It is the former Conservative MP who was elected as a Conservative MP, Christian Wakeford, and is now a Labour MP. All that after the news.
Good afternoon, it's 12 o'clock. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. P&O Ferries have suspended all sailings today ahead of an announcement later. In fact, we've just heard that all staff at P&O Ferries are reportedly being made redundant with immediate effect. Well, let's get more on this now. We can cross to GB News Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley. A major development in this story. Anna, what more do we know about this?
Yes, as you say, that news just coming in now. Reports from The Times and ITV that all staff at P&O Ferries are to be made redundant with immediate effect, and it's believed that over 4,000 staff work for the company. I'm here at the port of Hull at the moment. They run a service from Hull to Rotterdam. It's due to sail at 8:30 tonight, but we don't know if that's going to be happening. I've spoken to the local MP for Hull East, Carl Turner. He tells me that staff at the moment are on the ferry behind behind me, and they are doing a sit-in at the moment, refusing to move from the ferry to be replaced by these agency staff who are actually sat waiting in the car park to come on board. And it's obviously not just Hull, it's going to impact the Dover to Calais route as well, and so many staff being affected. This is an ongoing story, so we'll keep you updated as we get more news in on that.
Anna says we will keep you up to date with this story. On to other news now, and the Kremlin says it will disregard the UN's International Court of Justice demand that Russia halt its aggression. Moscow says talks with Ukraine are continuing today via video link. It's as NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg urged President Vladimir Putin to pull back his forces to avoid more bloodshed.
NATO has a responsibility to prevent this conflict from escalating further. That would be even more dangerous and would cause more suffering, death and destruction.
Ukrainian authorities say survivors are emerging after a Russian airstrike hit a theatre sheltering hundreds of civilians. The mayor of Mariupol has said the bomb shelter in the building withstood the shelling, but the number of casualties remains unclear. President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Moscow of intentionally targeting the theatre. A satellite image before the strike appeared to show the word children written in Russian on the pavement. Moscow has denied its involvement in the shelling. Meanwhile, President Zelensky said peace talks are still ongoing with the Kremlin.
My priorities during the...
Well, apologies for that. Let's move on now to the Ministry of Defence, who says the Russian invasion of Ukraine has largely stalled on all fronts. The latest intelligence update shows Russian forces have made minimal progress on land, sea and air and continue to suffer heavy losses. It adds the vast majority of Ukrainian territory, including all major cities, remains in Ukrainian hands. The British-Iranian charity worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe has finally been reunited with her family in the UK. The emotional reunion came after the 43-year-old was released from detention in Iran, where she'd been held for 6 years. Fellow British-Iranian Anousheh Ashuri was also released after being detained in Iran for nearly 5 years. Their plane touched down in the early hours of this morning at RAF Brize Norton. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says it's fantastic to see them safely back in Britain.
It's been a really difficult 48 hours, the expectation that they would be released, but we weren't sure right until the last minute. So it's been very emotional, but also a really happy moment for the families. And I'm pleased to say that both Nazanin and Anousheh are in good spirits and they're safe and well back here in Britain.
Government proposals for new internet safety laws are being introduced to Parliament today after a number of major updates. The online safety bill has been 5 years in the making. The legislation will force social media platforms to prevent users from seeing harmful content. Regulators will also have the power to fine companies or block access to sites that fail to comply. Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell told GB News she thinks this will make a difference, but there's still a long way to go.
Of the real concerns that I and others who are scrutinising and looking at these issues have is this sort of David and Goliath, where we've got a small British kind of regulator trying its very best to regulate the policies and the impact of some of these giant social media companies. So that's why we've been calling for a long time for tougher sanctions.
To the Manor-born star Peter Bowles has died. The actor played villains in several TV series, including The Avengers, becoming a household name as the archetypal English gent. But it was with a moustache alongside Dame Penelope Keith that he became most famous. He leaves behind 3 children and a wife of over 60 years. He was 85. And some news just in for you. The Bank of England has raised interest rates to 0.75% from 0.5%. And I'm sure we'll have more on this in just a moment. This is GB News. Now it's back to Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, we will be talking about that breaking news. that the Bank of England has just raised our interest rates, and also P&O have reportedly made all their staff redundant. And we'll be with our economics editor, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, and Anusha Ashuri are finally back where they belong, with their families in the UK after years of detention in Iran. Isn't it great to have some good news? I'll be joined by my panel of politicians, Conservatives and a Liberal Democrat MP, asking why it took so long. And the online safety bill is finally published today. Will it help keep our children safe online? Will free speech still be protected? And my Real Me interview today is with Christian Wakeford MP, who spectacularly crossed the floor from Conservative to Labour moments before PMQs. He felt so sick with nerves, he thought he might quit. And Keir Starmer. P&O Ferries have halted services pending a major announcement. Reportedly, all staff are being made redundant. Well, joining me to discuss that, and first of all, the news on that interest rate rise, is our economics editor, Liam Halligan. Interest rates have gone up. That's just been announced. What does it mean? By how much? Just talk us through it, Liam.
It's the third rise, Gloria, in 3 meetings. There was a rise in December from 0.1 to 0.25%. Another one in February from 0.25 to 0.5%. Now we've gone up from 0.5 to 0.75%. These are tiny little increments. Interest rates are still below 1%. They're still really, really low by historic standards. But the Federal Reserve, the US interest rate raised, the US Central Bank raised its interest rates last night. The Fed chair, Jerome Powell, he says, I'm old enough to remember when inflation was really high. And inflation's high in the UK as well. We're already at a 30-year high. It's going to get higher given the impact on fuel and food prices of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So what the Bank of England's doing, Gloria, even though the economy's slowing and this interest rate rise will make it more expensive to borrow, be quite painful, it's trying to demonstrate to financial markets, to companies, to all of us that it's serious about bearing down on inflation, trying to contain inflation. Because once there's a feeling that prices are going to rise, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and everybody puts up their prices and you get in a kind of self-reinforcing upward inflationary circle. That's what happened when we were kids in the 70s and the 80s and inflation spiralled out of control and hit above 20% in the UK. The Bank of England is trying to stop that happening now, but it's going to be painful.
For people who are not on fixed-rate mortgages and for those who need to borrow. Is that what we're talking about?
That's
here?
right.
Businesses and individuals.
If you're on a variable rate mortgage, your interest rate, I'm afraid, will now go up. If you have another personal loan that's not on a fixed rate, the cost of servicing that will go up. On the other hand, there's lots of people sitting on cash who live out of their savings, particularly pensioners.
Right.
Pensioners haven't had, any return on interest rates for years. Interest rates have always been lower than the rate of inflation. And they still are a lot lower than the rate of inflation, but at least for pensioners and others living on savings, interest rates are going up a bit. I don't think they're going to go all the way up to 4, 5, 6% where they were 10, 20 years ago. But I do think now, Gloria, we're going to see a succession of rate rises on both sides of the Atlantic and in Western Europe too.
And also more almost breaking news just before the interest rate rise. The news about P&O Ferries reportedly making all their staff redundant. Can you do that?
We've got to be very careful about this. It is a breaking news situation. We don't yet know for sure what's happening. What we do know is that P&O have 22,000 odd employees. They've been around since the mid-19th century. We know they operate 4 main routes, and they're very celebrated, well-established routes. Dover-Calais, from Hull to Rotterdam in the Netherlands, Liverpool to Dublin, crikey. What a well-trodden ferry path that is. And also Cairn Ryan in Scotland to Larne in Northern Ireland. All those services have been suspended for now. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has said he is, quote, shocked and, quotes, in urgent discussions with P&O. They say everyone has to wait for the announcement, though the RMT union, which, as you know, employs lots of people who work on in the ferry industry, they are alarmed. We don't yet know what exactly is going to happen. What we can say is that P&O say, quotes, they are not going into liquidation.
Yeah, and we also know that there will be some very concerned staff at
Absolutely,
P&O
and
right
passengers who don't know what to do. I mean, there'll be... ferry routes are a lot more used than people realise. We talk in the news about trains and planes all the time, but Ferries are still used a lot in our island nation, and there will be hundreds, perhaps thousands of passengers whose travel plans, even today, are seriously disjointed by this, and many, many more in the days and weeks to come.
Liam, busy show for you. Lots of economic news around today, and you'll be on air straight after me at 1 o'clock. Thanks for being with us.
Good to see you, Gloria.
After the break, we will be speaking to my great panel of politicians about the stories of the day. I'll be joined by Conservative MP Tim Loughton and Liberal Democrat MP Vera Hophouse. Before that, it is time for your weather.
Hello again. Spring sunshine to come for all of us over the next few days. Today, not everywhere seeing sunny skies, but we do have plenty of it, certainly across the south. And in that sunshine, it feels quite mild. Further north, we do have some showers around, low pressure and some weather fronts. But in the south, this high pressure is building in, bringing, as I say, a sunny day, certainly across much of southern England and to eastern England too. Further north, we're having more clouds and some showers over northern England, North Wales, maybe one or two drifting into southeast Wales and the Midlands. Certainly plenty of showers coming into Scotland, Northern Ireland, mostly of rain, but some snow over the hills across the Highlands. Not too many showers this afternoon for Northern Ireland, mostly dry and bright here. And temperatures here in Belfast, Glasgow, up to 10 or 11, but further south, 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees Celsius in that sunshine. Through the evening and overnight, we'll see those showers fading over northern England. We'll keep some going over the extreme northwest of Scotland, but otherwise a dry night and a clear night largely. But certainly across the Midlands, parts of Wales, southern England, some mist and fog patches are likely to form. Further north, it's likely to stay clear, and we are going to see a frost. A cold start wherever you are then to Friday, and there will be some perhaps quite dense patches of fog through the morning rush hour. Could take a couple of hours before that clears away completely, but it should eventually go. Certainly by late morning, it's looking largely dry and sunny. Sunshine fairly hazy at times over northern Scotland, but for most places, it's a cracking day if you like spring sunshine. Temperatures getting widely into the teens, 16, 17 Celsius is possible. Cooler with a brisk breeze across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. That brisk breeze lingers through Friday evening and into the weekend as well. We'll also see the wind picking up along the south coast of England. So that'll be a feature of the weather through Saturday, but look at that. Sunny skies almost across the board. By Sunday, just the threat of a few showers coming up across the south.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat. Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Prices are soaring and there's war in Europe. But at last, we've got some good news. At 1 a.m. this morning, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe and Anousheh Ashouri finally arrived back in Britain and hugged their families, having been detained in Iran for years. But why did it take so long? Well, joining me to discuss this and the other big stories of the day, my fantastic panel, Tim Loughton, Conservative MP for East Worthing and Shoreham, and Vera Hobhouse, Liberal Democrat MP for Bath. Welcome to you both. It's very good to see you.
Morning,
can I
Gloria.
start, before we talk about the great news on Nazanin, Tim, could I start by asking you about the news that has been reported that P&O are to make all their onboard crew redundant? Your reaction to that, Tim Loughton?
Well, P&O is one of those great old British names, although it was taken over by the Dubai Port Company some years ago. And I think, as Liam said when you were speaking to him earlier, it's quite unclear the full extent of this. But it's still a big company. This involves the ferries. I don't think this involves the cruise ships division, but still those are ferries that go between Dover and Calais and Hull and Rotterdam and across to Scotland and Ireland, I think, as well. And it's 4,000 employees. So that would have a pretty serious impact if that were to disappear. It's not clear at this stage, though, Gloria, whether they're going to just scale it down or close the whole operation. I just don't know, but it would have a serious impact, whatever happens out of all of this.
And Vera, same point to you, if I may.
Well, who hasn't been on a P&O ferry? I have many times, and it's a company that has got a very good reputation, so it's a bit of a shock to hear that they're halting operations, certainly for the passenger ferries. I'm feeling particularly for the staff, and I wonder why that hadn't obviously been communicated, that there's going to be a very urgent announcement to be made. I understand there's agency staff waiting to take over. Why? So I feel particularly for the staff, who must feel very worried, particularly as we are now in a cost of living crisis. So, losing your jobs just like that, how is it for them? But then also, of course, for the passengers, those who had been hoping to go on a P&O ferry tonight or this afternoon, and they're suddenly stuck. So what alternative arrangements are there for them? Why has that not been communicated to those who are most affected more effectively?
Thank you both for that. Nazanin, staying with you, we're all delighted to see those amazing pictures of Nazanin reunited with her husband, with her daughter. Why did it take 6 years?
Who are you asking, Gloria?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Vera.
I think you've just called Vera Nazanin.
That is a very good question, of course. So first of all, I think yesterday and today are days of celebration, and I think the questions will have to come afterwards. So my heart goes out to the families, both families, Nazanin's and Anousheh's family. They must be overwhelmed with emotions in all directions. And I think we need to give the families privacy now. When you hear of those who have been victims and have been hostages in the past, they need a lot of time to get over the trauma that they undoubtedly have and will have to get over in the next few years, really. So that's my first thought about all of this. My heart goes out to the families. It is a joyful day for all of us, but a lot of difficulties also that should not be put under the carpet. We need to give these hostage victims time to recover, and they will need professional help. Why did it take so long? Good question. This is a debt that dates back to the 1970s. So why has it not been paid back? Why, if that was the only hindrance of getting these two people out of a terrible ordeal, has it taken so long? So questions need to be answered. I hope that actually the government will have a full inquiry around why this took so long. I'm sure the public want to have answers.
And Tim, why do you think Liz Truss, as Foreign Secretary, has succeeded where previous Foreign Secretaries have not?
It's difficult to tell. Just to echo what Wira said, there was literally not a dry eye in the House yesterday when the announcement was made, and particularly when Juliet Siddiqui, Nazanin's MP, referred to Gabriella, her daughter and husband were up in the gallery. So it's great to have a bit of good news amongst all the terrible news going on at the moment. So what the Foreign Secretary said yesterday is there has been a change of government in Iran. It's still not a particularly friendly government, but she made contact with her new shadows back in September, and I think there's been a renewed sort of diplomatic push. This has been hugely complicated. And let's remember, the reason Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was in jail in Iran is because the Iranian government put her there on completely trumped-up charges and have effectively been holding her hostage for a ransom, and that shouldn't happen again. Now, what the Foreign Secretary did acknowledge yesterday, that this was a debt, that we pay our debts, and this is a historical debt that goes way back to the time of the Shah, and the money wasn't paid over because then the Shah fell and the new Ayatollah's regime came in, against which there are sanctions and against which there are now substantial sanctions, meaning that we can't just give sums of money to that regime or we fall foul of international sanction laws and money laundering and everything else. So this was, although it sounds like an excuse, this was a hugely problematic issue where a lot of creative diplomacy was required. And I gather the intervention and the really practical help and skills of the Omanis really helped bring this to a successful resolution at long last. But the moral of the story is that the Iranian government should not be holding people for whom there's no proper legal basis in international law and natural justice in jail, and now releasing them only when we've handed over £400 million, which we acknowledged was due to the Iranian government, albeit back in the 1970s.
I'm going to stick with you to move on to the next story, which is the publication of the Online Harms Bill. And I'd like to ask you, as a former children's minister, do you think it will provide children with the protection they need in terms of protecting them against suicide sites, encouraging self-harm, bullying, being exposed to pornography? Those are the big things that all parents worry about. Is this going to get tough on that?
Well, it's a step in the right direction. And again, it's a hugely problematic and technical piece of legislation, and it's all about getting the balance right, that we don't want censorship. We want people to be able to use the internet and social media in a responsible way, and people have a right, whether we like it or not, to offend other people. But people don't have a right to be gratuitously abusive, to promote hate crime and things that, if they were to do face-to-face, would be criminal activities. And my biggest concern, you're quite right, as a former children's minister, and I used to chair the United Kingdom Child Internet Safety Council, which was looking at this problem 10 years ago as to how we keep kids safer on the internet. There is too much stuff easily accessible on the internet, and it's down to the internet providers, the platform providers, to be taking this stuff down very quickly and preferably not allowing it there in the first place. And we need to have much clearer guidelines about what can be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And that's what this bill is hoping to set out. But there are going to be lots of arguments, there are going to be lots of debates, and when we get the legislation, there'll be lots of amendments in Parliament. But we've got to make sure that kids can go online safely, and when there's stuff there that's harming them, that there's a very easy route for that to be taken down. And ultimately, I am in favour of going the whole hog and getting rid of anonymity on people who put this stuff up. Their names should be known to the internet providers, to the social media platforms, so that if they do constantly use them for abuse and hate speech, which is committing criminal activities if it goes on, then they can be banned from using social media for that purpose. I think that's the only way, ultimately, that people are really going to be stopped from putting the stuff that is completely undermining what most of us try and use the internet for.
Thank you, Tim. Vera, there was so much that I wanted to talk to you about today, including the debates that you've been leading this week, but we're going to go to an interview with the RMT. But could I finally ask you, as a Liberal, and briefly if you would, are you worried that we may inadvertently ban some free speech?
Well, it is about stopping harm, not to stop free speech. And let's say one thing. It needs to be focused on preventing harm for those who are the most vulnerable, not just children. And so the government has already sort of tried to limit expectations, said the online safety bill is not going to be a Christmas tree on which we are going to hang a lot of things. There's broad cross-party consensus about the need for having a bill like this. It depends on how far it's going to go. And therefore, let's wait and see. The bill has not been published yet. We'll have a lot of debate in Parliament around that. Absolutely, it should not be about stifling free speech. It should be about preventing harm. And there it depends on how far the government is prepared to go to make it a victim-centric piece of legislation and not letting get the big companies, let them get away with it while we do harm to vulnerable people.
Thanks so much to both of you. I wish we had more time, but thank you very much indeed for your time. More on that news now from P&O Ferries, where all staff have reportedly been made redundant, effective immediately. Let's speak to Gaz Jackson from the RMT union, who is in Hull. Thank you so much for your time. What do you know?
Yeah, good morning. So I received a phone call off my National Secretary, Darren Proctor, around 8 o'clock this morning, telling me to get across to Hull. I'm the regional organiser that covers this region, so this is one of my responsibilities, the Pride of Hull. Our membership got a video briefing at 11 o'clock this morning saying that the contract of employment is terminating instantly and they'll all be made redundant. We're currently sat on the Pride of Hull with the gangway up. The captain's authorised that. He's not letting anybody on or off the ship. So we're just waiting here so we can get a suitable resolution to this situation.
What do you want the government to do?
Well, what we want the government to do is guarantee the future of our British seafarers. Our British ratings on this Pride of Hull will disappear from today if the company get their own way.
What are your members feeling? Have you spoken to any of members of the crew who had that terrible, terrible news video briefing you described this morning?
Yeah, I've spoken to all individually. We've got a meeting with the captain at 12:30 as well, just to talk through things a little bit further. The members, as you can imagine, are very upset and very angry. They can see from the window, just to the right where I'm sat, you can see the coachload of ratings, foreign ratings that are going to come and take their jobs, and also a minibus full of security guards that are probably going to be looking at taking us off this on board today. So we're not going anywhere. So we would appeal to the company to get back round the table, or actually to get round the table with the RMT, because there was no consultation in the first place. It was a surprise to us as much as our members, and get this mess sorted.
And is this shining a light, this episode, on how strong or otherwise our employment laws are in this country?
Well, I think it's quite an interesting point because, we have a Dutch crew on the Pride of Rotterdam, and if they was to make redundancies on the Dutch contracts, they have to go through a court system, whereas in this country, as long as they give the relevant notice, they can make people redundant. So our employment rights are poor compared to on the continent.
Jackson from the RMT. Our thoughts are with all those staff members today. Thank you for your time, for bringing us up to date with what you know. Thank you. Next, after the news, we will be talking to the former Conservative MP who crossed the floor to Labour. He tells me just how hard it's been and how a hug from a former colleague gave him a much-needed boost. He also talks to the tragic death of his brother, who was killed in a car crash. Plus, we'll be speaking to Gregory Campbell about the BBC licence fee and what he thinks needs to change. That is all after the news.
It's 12:30. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. All staff at P&O Ferries are reportedly being made redundant with immediate effect. It's understood the company, which sails major routes, including between Britain and France, will use agency staff to sail their ships. The ferry operator has denied it's going into liquidation. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps says officials will be having urgent discussions with the firm. The Bank of England has raised interest rates from 0.5% to 0.75%. It comes ahead of an inflation hike expected next month, estimated to reach around 8%, which the bank warns could peak even higher later in the year. The bank says squeeze on household budgets, exacerbated by the conflict in Ukraine, is likely to be larger than it had predicted last month. It was already set to be the biggest in 30 years. The Kremlin says it will disregard the International Court of Justice demand that Russia halt its aggression. Moscow says talks with Ukraine are continuing today via video link. It has NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg urged President Putin to pull back his forces to avoid more bloodshed.
NATO has a responsibility to prevent this conflict from escalating further. That would be even more dangerous and would cause more suffering, death and destruction.
The British-Iranian charity worker Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe has finally been reunited with her family in the UK. The emotional reunion came after the 43-year-old was released from detention in Iran, where she'd been held for 6 years. Fellow British-Iranian Anousheh Ashuri was also released after being detained in the country for nearly 5 years. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says it's fantastic to see them safely back in Britain. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. It's back to Gloria in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now it's time for my latest Real Me interview. Former Conservative, now Labour MP Christian Wakeford tells me how hard it was to cross the floor of the House of Commons. Christian Wakeford, you're 37. You were a Conservative Party member for nearly 20 years. You'd become a Conservative councillor in May 2013. You're now a Labour MP. What happened?
I think, to be fair, when we got down here, it was a lot of excitement. It was all new. It was I mean, even on the night of accounts, no one really knew what was happening other than a big landslide victory. And you would think with that, you could really do some radical transformative change for the benefit of the country. Yes, we've had COVID, but where's the change? Where's the actual improvement been? And on the back of that, with threats to my constituency, if I didn't vote a particular way, I wouldn't get a new high school, or I'd hold back an entire town's regeneration for me voting a particular way. And there's only so much of the threats, the broken promises of this bill isn't quite the right place for this amendment. It will come forward in the next bill, and then you realise it hasn't. And to some level, that's naivety of being new and trusting. But again, there's only so many times you can have a broken promise before you think, well, it's not coming, is it? So between that and actually voting, against my better judgment on things that I care about, I think it got to the point where I couldn't stay any longer. And after the best part of 20 years, that was a huge decision to come to. Many sleepless nights and almost a kind of existential identity crisis. But through kind of talking through it, internal monologue style, and kind of coming to that conclusion that actually the matters that I do care about, whether it was social mobility, alcohol harm, or actually international aid, etc. The Conservatives weren't even talking about it, let alone trying to offer a meaningful solution. And I found myself agreeing more and more with Keir, and it just felt like a natural fit by that point.
It's a hard thing to do because being in a political party, it's a bit like being in a family. And how are you? Are you okay?
I'm good. I mean, apart from the first couple of weeks where it felt very much like a rabbit in the headlights, I mean that PMQs was awful. I think generally my greatest achievement was not throwing up on the back of Keir's head, and I'm sure he's grateful for that too.
Tell me why it was awful.
Well, I mean, you'll remember just the way Parliament's set up. You're literally staring at 300 of your former friends and colleagues trying not to make eye contact whilst trying to make eye contact. And there were heckles. There was abusive language, and there's been some apologies. And do I expect people to agree with me? No. If they did, they'd be crossing the floor with me. But I hope they understand that actually it's not been an easy decision to come to, but it's one that I genuinely think was the right decision for not only for me, but for my constituents and ultimately the country.
I understand just from reading that you were the one to approach the Labour Party. Can you remember who you first spoke to? You don't have to tell me anything that you would rather not.
Actually, it was kind of a bit of a mix. It was kind of approaches through friends in the PLP saying, actually, the leadership are really liking some of the things you're saying, whether it was on universal credit when I was at Conservative Party conference, and I didn't really hold my punches then. When we got to the Owen Paterson issue, and I was certainly outspoken on that one. It then got to the point where there was approaches, and I just got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore. So I agreed to meet, and obviously whilst being on crutches, I couldn't go too far away from parliamentary estate because it took a long time at that point. But it was the starting of the meetings, and I guess the rest is history.
And how far in advance did you start those meetings before you crossed the floor?
I guess the first proper meeting would have been late November, early December. So it got to that point, coupled just before Christmas. Intentionally took a step back to actually relax, recuperate from 10 weeks on crutches with a broken ankle, and actually kind of have some of that kind of deep thought as to there are only so many meetings I can have before really there's no turning back. So we agreed to meet again on the day after.
When you say we, is it Keir? Or are you prefer not to name the person?
I mean, it's been well reported so far. It was Chris Elmore.
Who you'd become friends with or chatted with, and...
Yeah, so a lot of meetings kind of off the estate, and very shortly afterwards, I think the academic side of it very much being when, not if, it was then trying to kind of overcome the emotional side. Because, you know, like I said, after 20 years, there's a lot of friendships, almost family, within the Conservative Party, and trying to kind of get to that kind of thought pattern as to, I'm going to do this, but it's going to hurt them, and it's going to really hurt people that I care deeply about. They're my friends, I've campaigned with them, you know, they're colleagues, they're people I admire, and it will hurt, but there's no other way to do it.
Does it still hurt?
It does, and yeah, I think the negative comments have stopped. It's more of a blanking from some friends, and you know, they're friends of kind of 12, 13, 14 years, and you know, it will take a long time because they're the ones who will feel the most hurt, will feel the most betrayed, and you know, will things ever be the same again? I doubt it, but I genuinely hope there is a way back to that friendship, because you know, friends do mean a lot to me.
Friendship shouldn't be based on what anybody's politics are. They're based, you would hope, on something.
Yeah, and to be fair, there are some who will still openly give me a hug in the middle of Portcullis House, and that's really nice, and actually meant a lot over the last couple of weeks. It will just take some time, I think.
And just to explain to people watching, the House of Commons tea room. So it is like a CAF, but you sit in different bits of that CAF depending on your party allegiance. However, when you're queuing to pick up your toastie or your cup of coffee, then everybody is in that queue. I mean, things like that must be emotionally difficult in case you're stood next to somebody from your former party.
I mean, it was probably more the anticipation of a lot of these first things. So kind of going back into the chamber for the first time, although I chose my debate quite wisely, 'cause who's going to heckle me when I'm talking about the Holocaust? But yeah, going to the tea room, going to strangers, going through Portcullis House, and trying to actually meet people, but not meet people at the same time. You know, it was tough, but I think we got through all that, and yeah, I mean, I think the benefit on the Labour side is there's comfy chairs, which is brilliant. But yeah, it was tough to begin with, but I think we've got through that now.
And I'm not going to ask you, because it's a private matter, but one of your former Conservative colleagues, it was that hugged you in Portcullis recently, was it?
Mm. Yeah, it was.
And that meant a lot to you, it would. Somebody recognised that's pain, that you, to undergo the process, which you're convinced is the right process, but it's a painful one nonetheless. Yeah. Fascinating, and you'll continue on this journey, and I'm sure there'll be highs and struggles along the way, but thanks for opening up about that.
Yeah, well, I think I was certainly more anxious about my first CLP meeting
than I know all about Labour Party meetings.
Yeah, than I was about going to Kyiv, and you know, that was a potential war zone at the time, and it was again, it was kind of one of those of rebuilding bridges with former colleagues, but building bridges with new colleagues. And again, I'm not expecting anyone to be my best friend on day one, but hopefully they see it's sincere, and you know, I'm committed to this as much as anyone.
Way before you had moved to change parties, I was desperate to speak to you for one of these interviews. For this reason, which I'd like you to explain what happened to your family on the night of February the 13th, 2015.
So on that night, and my brother had recently been living with me on the back of his marriage breakdown. So we chatted that day, as one would do with their brother. But shortly after 11 o'clock at night, I got a knock on the door by the police to tell me that Mark had been in an accident and he'd died on the motorway. It turns out he was over the limits quite substantially, and we knew that he'd had a dependency issue. But at one point we got him sectioned and tried to get mental health support for him. But in order to really do that, you need to tackle the mental health and the alcohol dependency, and I don't think both were attempted to be tackled at the same time. So whilst we knew there was drinking, it was trying to normalise that and say, well, if you want to drink, you know, we'll drink with you, to try and overcome some of those boundaries. But it then transpired that actually whilst he was doing that, there was a lot of secret drinking as well. And whilst no one chooses to be an addict, you know, it's very difficult to help at the same time. So, you know, I then had to, you know, go in the back of a police car to to identify my brother. And for that day, there are still a lot of questions I can't ask. There's probably still to this day a lot of anger and all the stages of grief that you can't really go through, because you can't ask any of the questions to anyone. And through the work I've been doing, certainly down here, I've been able to understand it a lot more. Does it lessen the hurt? No. But in the education I've given myself, it means that at least I can almost comprehend and understand the troubles of problem drinking and how that can escalate very, very quickly.
When were you aware that your brother had a drink problem?
Probably about the November. So it was the December when we'd taken him to hospital, because he was in a state where he was literally crying out for help. And what do you do when it's your older brother? You try to find that help, and even just trying to find a mental health bed was a challenge, let alone with any alcohol speciality. So certainly at the time, signposting was poor. I think it's still a postcode lottery now, and some places are brilliant. I mean, I didn't even know I had an alcohol specialist ward in my own constituency until I was in a meeting that I was chairing, and one of the nurses happened to be there, and we got chatting, and we've spoken quite a few times now. But if you don't know what's in your own constituency when you're a member of Parliament, then how are you going to know that as a member of the public who actually just wants to know what support they can get, what help they can get, and who to speak to?
And so Mark developed a drink problem, you think, as a result of his marriage breakdown. So it wasn't something you remember. He was, it had always been there as he was growing up.
Not that I'm aware from growing up, and whether it was before the marriage breakdown, the cause of the marriage breakdown, I don't know. But it was certainly there, and I think when we were finding bottles of vodka around the house, and ultimately in his car as well, that's when we started realising that actually this was a lot more than just liking a drink. And there are many people who like a drink, but this was clearly something a lot more and a lot worse.
What's the impact that something so shocking as the loss of the most loved person to you and your mum and dad, obviously?
Yeah, well, I mean, it rips the heart out of the family. I mean, my twin brother doesn't really talk about it. To be the one having to ring round family that night to say, look, you need to come around first thing in the morning to go through it, and having to drive to one of my older brothers to tell him and his dad that actually this had happened. Yeah, it's a weekend that I'll never forget, but really don't want to relive in any form, because it fundamentally changed everything overnight.
And how important is it for you to campaign on the services that are available to those who are drink dependent?
Well, it's not even just that. There are things we can do quite quickly and quite easily, and whether it's changing alcohol labelling. So actually there's the calorific content, but actually full health warnings on there, like there would be with cigarette packages, to actually try to change the Equalities Act to make addiction. So at the moment there's a memorandum of exclusion because addiction is still seen as a personal choice. So what can we do to actually get that as a protected characteristic? Maybe not with access to benefit, but at least so your employer has a duty of care to look after you. These are all things that could be done very quickly if there was the will to do so. I mean, we saw in the budget last year that actually talking about alcohol duty in a public health messaging, that was almost a paradigm shift, and it went down very well with the APPG. We just need to do more and go further. But on the back of asking a question about an alcohol strategy nearly 2 years ago, I seem to have got pushed into the national limelight for kind of campaigning on this issue, and I'm nothing special. I just happen to have a platform where I get to speak very loudly and very publicly about what really needs to be done. There are people who've gone through their own lived experience. I mean, I look at Dan Carden, and we struck up a friendship before crossing for
Left-wing Labour MP. Yeah.
From Liverpool.
Yeah.
So being a Manchester-based Tory MP at the time, it seemed an unusual one. But from his personal instance, my family instance, we got chatting and did joint interviews, joint campaigns, and we even got to meet Kate Middleton on the back of it for trying to destigmatise addiction. But it's that lived experience which is so important. So when anyone comes forward with their own story, we need to give them a platform to deliver that, really.
Finally, do you think politics and Parliament could be a better place if there were more friendships from across parties and less tribalism, I suppose?
I mean, short answer is yes. Consensus, compromise isn't a dirty word. Unfortunately, I think it has become in the last few years, and we generally have lost the art to disagree. I mean, we can always find parts we agree on, and especially when you agree on, the ends, just not the means. Find that common ground. There is a lot more that unites everyone than divides us. But the one key thing which we need to really grasp is compassion. People go through the worst kind of histories, and there are those in Parliament, there are those outside, and you don't know anyone's background until you talk to them. Offer that compassion. If you need a hug, give them a hug. But just be there, be prepared to listen, and if you do disagree, find a way to do so respectfully.
Christian Wakeford, Labour MP for Bury South. Thank you. Now, Gregory Campbell MP held a debate on BBC accountability and transparency on Tuesday this week. He's the DUP MP for East Londonderry, and he joins me now. Hi there. Hi, good to see you.
And you.
Just tell me in a sentence or two why you chose to secure this debate in Parliament this week on BBC transparency and accountability.
You'll probably be familiar with the age-old problem that the BBC had in terms of the presenters, who are obviously paid for out of the public purse through the licence fee, but they were very reticent for many years to declare what their salaries and their overheads were, but were very proactive at asking people like me and others in the public domain, quite rightly, what our salaries were and our overheads were. So that took a long time to rectify that. It's only in recent years the BBC have moved to that point. The problem that I have now, and many people have, is that there are a small number of people, very small number of people, who work for the BBC. They're part of the on-screen talent, as it is called, but they have their private companies, media companies, who supply firms, films, short stories, and sometimes contracts for a series to the BBC, and we don't know how much they receive for that. The BBC don't declare that, the presenters don't declare that, and the more important thing, even beyond that, is that very often they get the opportunity to advertise those programmes that the independent sector don't get. Because if you're a presenter, for example, on the BBC, and you have a company, and you're going to have a film or a programme on that evening or the next evening, you get the opportunity on your BBC programme to advertise that, to obviously get higher ratings, which means the next time the contract comes round, you've got the inside track, you've got a benefit, you've got an advantage over the independent sector. I think that is totally unfair, and the BBC should be more open and more transparent.
Would you give the BBC some credit for the moves that it has made, like publishing the salaries of its presenters, like publishing the number of complaints they receive? And Tim Davie, the new Director General from September 2020, says his first priority is renewing the BBC's commitment to impartiality. They are doing their best to be as good as they can be, is their argument.
I think Tim Davie has been an improvement on previous incumbents in the post, but he has a long way to go. The problem is, if you are a long way behind what the public want, you have a considerable distance to go to get up to where the public want to be. And so, I mean, for example, the licence fee, if I watch one programme, if I listen to one live radio station piece on the BBC, I am liable to pay the BBC licence fee, even if I don't watch it for the rest of the year. So that is a regressive tax on very many people. And thankfully now the government are trying to move away from that, and that's progress. I think the BBC have made some progress, but they've a lot more to do. So it's a sort of a marking, if you like, an exam marking. They've done well, but they need to do a lot better.
Very clear. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Gregory Campbell, DUP MP. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Isabel Oakeshott will be here tomorrow at noon. Join me again on Monday. Liam Halligan will be here in just a minute with On the Money. Lots of economic news today. But for now, it's time for your weather.
Hello again. Spring sunshine to come for all of us over the next few days. Today, not everywhere seeing sunny skies, but we do have plenty of it, certainly across the south. And in that sunshine, it feels quite mild. Further north, we do have some showers around, low pressure and some weather fronts. But in the south, this high pressure is building in, bringing, as I say, a sunny day, certainly across much of southern England and eastern England too. Further north, we're having more clouds and some showers over northern England, North Wales, maybe one or two drifting into southeast Wales and the Midlands. Certainly plenty of showers coming into Scotland, Northern Ireland, mostly of rain, but some snow over the hills across the Highlands. Not too many showers this afternoon for Northern Ireland, mostly dry and bright here. And temperatures here in Belfast, Glasgow, up to 10 or 11, but further south, 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees Celsius in that sunshine. Through the evening and overnight, we'll see those showers fading over northern England. We'll keep some going over the extreme northwest of Scotland, but otherwise a dry night and a clear night largely. But certainly across the Midlands, parts of Wales, southern England, some mist and fog patches are likely to form. Further north, it's likely to stay clear, and we are going to see a frost. A cold start wherever you are then to Friday, and there will be some perhaps quite dense patches of fog through the morning rush hour. Could take a couple of hours before that clears away completely, but it should eventually go. Certainly by late morning it's looking largely dry and sunny. Sunshine fairly hazy at times over northern Scotland, but for most places it's a cracking day if you like spring sunshine. Temperatures getting widely into the teens, 16, 17 Celsius is possible. Cooler with a brisk breeze across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. That brisk breeze lingers through Friday evening and into the weekend as well. We'll also see the wind picking up along the south coast of England. So that'll be a feature of the weather through Saturday. But look at that, sunny skies almost across the board. By Sunday, just